I'm Bugsy and I'm a recovering addict. I'm going to be reading just for today, November 19th, 2024, The Language of Empathy, page 337, basic text, page 88. The addict would find from the start as much identification as each needed to convince himself that he could stay clean, by the example of others who had recovered for many years. Many of us attended our first meeting and, not being entirely sure that NA was for us, found much to criticize. Either we felt as though no one had suffered like we had, or that we hadn't suffered enough. But as we listened, we started to hear something new, a wordless language with its roots in recognition, belief, and faith. The language of empathy. Desiring to belong, we kept listening. We find all the identification we need as we learn to understand and speak the language of empathy. To understand this special language, we must listen with our hearts. The language of empathy uses few words. It feels more than it speaks. It doesn't preach or lecture. It listens. It can reach out and touch the spirit of another addict without a single spoken word. Fluency in the language of empathy comes to us through practice. The more we use it with other addicts and our higher power, the more we understand this language. It keeps us coming back. Just for today, I will listen with my heart. With each passing day, I will become more fluent in the language of empathy. First, I want to explain the difference between sympathy and empathy, because I think some people use it interchangeably. Sympathy is when you go, oh, I'm so sorry, I feel so bad for you, I feel sorry for you, oh, poor baby. But empathy is when you're like, dang, I can relate, I understand. But the distinction that's very important when you're empathizing is to know that you can relate to somebody else's pain or experience, but you have to remain distant from them. Like, you can say, like, I understand where you're coming from without putting yourself in their shoes, if that makes sense. You can't tell somebody, I know what you went through, I know how you felt. You can say, I can relate to how you felt, because when you sit there and tell them, oh, I understand exactly how you feel, it kind of takes away from their experience. Does that make sense? You have to make sure that you can keep the distance between their story and your relation to it. So you relate to somebody. You can understand where they're coming from. You can never exactly know how someone else is feeling in a certain situation or experience that they've gone through, whether it's good or bad. You can't say, though, oh, I know exactly what you're feeling. You can say, you know what? I understand how you feel, because this happened to me. And when that happened to me, this is how I felt. But I can relate to your story, and vice versa. Does that make sense? So some people think sympathy and empathy are the same thing, and it's not. We don't go to NA or share our stories with people for them to sympathize with us. We don't want them feeling sorry for us. We would prefer, I am using this as a generalization because I'm basically assuming that everybody would prefer this, but I'm assuming, so just keep that in mind. We would prefer you to empathize, to take something from our story and use it as a lesson in your own life. If you feel like you can connect to somebody's experience and their relatable experience, then take that and understand that you guys are on the same page. You know where you're coming from. I don't know exactly what you're feeling, but I know where you're coming from. And I know that we might have the same or similar story, and I know how I felt when that happened to me, so I can only imagine how it's feeling to you. I don't want you to sit here and say, oh, poor baby, pity me. I don't want you to pity me. I don't want you to sit there and just feel sorry and like, oh my gosh, come here, give me a hug. I'll make it all go away. Oh, because that just kind of belittles the whole experience that we went through. And it kind of makes it smaller, the fight we had to get to recovery. It almost makes it feel like you're being condescending to me. You're being patronizing. That it's like, oh, this poor baby, she was so lost, or he was so broken. It's, wow, you know what? I feel like I'm not alone anymore, because you understand where I'm coming from, and I understand where you're coming from. And it took a lot for you to come out of the fire from that, to be reborn, as the phoenix for Narcotics Anonymous represents, being reborn from the ashes. We were reborn. We climbed our way out of the hell that we put ourselves in. And I don't want you to feel sorry or feel pity towards me. And I do not want to pity you. certainly I can relate, and certainly I can have empathy to that, saying, oh my gosh, I understand, or wow, that had to have been difficult. I can never say, I know exactly what you went through. I know exactly how you felt, because everybody has their own feelings and everybody has their own way of reacting and their own thoughts on how things are going in their life. Something can happen, the same exact thing can happen to two people, and one person might walk away with a different experience than you, but you guys can relate to that experience because you've both been there. But I can never tell you how to feel. Nobody ever can tell you how to feel. I used to tell my kids that all the time. No one has the right to tell you how to feel. If you feel sad because of a certain situation that somebody else might find as minuscule and unimportant, ignore them. It doesn't matter what they think and how they feel, because it's not their feelings. It's your experience. It's what you're feeling. But also, like I've said, I kind of feel like I'm being really repetitive and redundant on this, but understand that you can relate to somebody without pitying them. So learn empathy. And empathy doesn't have to have a voice. You don't have to sit there and have the answer when somebody is sharing their story. You don't have to sit there and have some kind of response to it. A simple show of support would suffice. Nodding your head along because you're actually listening and you're absorbing what's being told in the story, and you're kind of putting yourself in their shoes but not walking in their shoes. You just want to be able to see from their perspective of what they went through, and maybe think, oh wow, you know what? I kind of went through the same thing, and if they can do it, I certainly can try. And you want to just listen. Maybe give a hug, hold a hand, pat someone on the back. Give them a clap after they share. Do something that shows that you're empathizing. You hear them, because their pain is valid just as much as your pain is valid. And I kind of said in the beginning of this whole reflection that I'm assuming that most addicts don't want you to pity them. I'm not sitting there thinking like, oh wow, their life sucks. Wow, poor them. They did it on their own, or whatever kind of mean thing that you can think of, or even overtly you're overly expressing to somebody that, like, I feel bad for you. I would assume that we would want somebody to say, wow, you're a strong person for climbing out of that hell. But anyway, at the risk of sounding extra redundant, I'm going to leave it here. Hopefully I touched base on the topic. I kind of started over a few times, so I'm just going to keep on going. I try to do this as a cold read, and it is a cold read, so I try not to start over too many times, but empathize with people. But don't put yourself in their shoes so that you can walk in them. Put yourself in their shoes so you can see their perspective, to maybe learn a perspective that you haven't seen, the relation of this situation in your own life. Oh wow, I never thought of it that way. Wow, I can relate to you, and the way you just expressed it to me, now I can look at it at a different angle, and vice versa. Anyway, I'm gonna zip right now, and I hope everyone's doing well out there, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.